Thank you, Hayden. That was a pretty overwhelming introduction. I just hope you enjoy what I read tonight. The first poem is called Dubious Advice for the Lovelorn. For the fortunate among us, love butchers us at least once, leaves a piece cold on the gurney. We hobble away wondering, is the pain we feel real? Or is it just a phantom limb screeching? No heart, no warmth. What was love now? Merely a shadow cast by a void. How can a thing hurt so when it's not there but still bleeds? Was it you who pushed her away, or she who shoved you out the door? These queries are of no consequence. Either way, the phantom limb tugs at you like a child, demands you make it all better. But you cannot make it all better. Love severed is breathless and done. You are expected to learn from such events as when you wished her to suffer forever, but never as long as you. A brief history of apple pie. 1. In the garden. They glared at what was left of it, bite marks etched on what was the apple. Its core, now just a sour spindle of seeds and membrane turned brown. A woeful end, if not worse, to life everlasting. The first man whined to the first woman, "You just wouldn't listen." The woman turned to her seducer and said, "None was my intention. You are a snake." To which it hissed, "Never said I otherwise," then snickered, for death was his invention. As the three bickered back and forth, the knowing tree in the eye of the garden spat its fruit, round and red, to the ground. Then the beasts, fowl, and fishes turned and trembled to see the craze of apples bound madly down to the new place called hell. 2. Banished. They hunched by the fire, sat close to the light. This woman and her man, naked and worried, sorted through apples as bruised as their days, when in the dim gloaming and their cold, clumsy tending, 3 fell away, 1 each for the woman, the man, and the snake. Those apples rolled to the coals and came to repose, embraced in the fire as if they were damned flesh. This woman and her man sat naked and warming, ashamed of their undoing, but unsuited for hell. They smelled the apples come sweet from the heat, blossoms in the field, bees and honey in the sun, the fruit now flowing lava toward the flames. She took yesterday's dry biscuit and coddled what remained, held it to cool in her blistered hands. Those damned apples now transfigured into sweetness so sublime, they forgot in that lovely 5th season without time the bitter and ruin of what they'd wrought. This woman and her man, naked and holding on to their ambitions, vain and vexed, then stared in the fire to dare dream of what worlds with or without salvation would come next. 3. Redeemed. The old man slumped in from the yard with the tree's final giving, misshapen and spare, muttered, "All but this, taken by frost in the orchard." He emptied a great pail as if he didn't care, dumped the scrawny, wrinkled apples on the oak table, scoured and bare. Soon the old woman, all elbows and hands, raised a pie from the oven, a sacrament to quiet the old man's regrets, which like dogs in search of bone, woke him each morning with their yelps and their threats to insist he be alone. Now she scolded him. Wait, it's too hot. He became a reckless boy again, and wait he would not. Face as big as a moon, he swooned down to eat. All free will, he bit that pie, then blared with heat, yet would not burn his lips, such forgiving to inspire mercy, to remember still this woman and her man warming by the fire. The witness. It is disease in one of us that thwarts our measure. Both ends of the telescope make distances too far or too close. Small talk metastasizes the mundane, yet life and death chatter beside us in a language no one speaks. No time remains to waste a breath. Our wives whisper in another room. We sit on life's little couch, two mutes waiting and watching, bathed in the glow of TV news. Storms, bombs, and the usual, until, as if to break the monotony, the leader of the free world says that he didn't have sex with that woman. We join the rest of the planet, laugh until a swarm of coughs tries to smother him. What is under his skin and ribs is a pretense of lungs, useless as frayed burlap. He calls me as a witness to his disappearing, takes my hand, wraps it round his wrist. Like a broomstick, he says, lifts his shirt, shows me his chest, a sea of red blisters. The visible is too much. I abandon my eyes to see the swimmer, the diver, who could hold his breath forever, the shortstop whose moves in a double play defied gravity. His conviction to live is larger than life. There's more to it than statistics, he says. That's right, I crow, as if loud and eager might reverse the planet's spin, liberate him from his body's prison. But the same cannibal cells come calling and claim more of him, till what's left is relentless as a cough, weightless as a hope, hopeless as a prayer. I would not demand that he rage against anything, no less the last light, but rather bend into final forgiving night. Watch with me another last time. The young diver, poised high above us, spring upward, his lungs full with his first breath, all of him a dream gliding to the clear below, the blue, self-same sea of all tides which will receive him, a returning wave that rolls back into its knowing self to once again become ocean. This is an excerpt from the memoir, The Sayonara Cowboy. The memoir follows a trajectory of a boy, his mother a Yokohama shop girl, and his father an American GI, as they strive to keep their family together, first in Japan, then in the U.S. In this chapter, titled The Reluctant Fugitive, the boy is 6 years old, and at this point, they live with his paternal grandparents in Millington, New Jersey. His biggest challenge will be his mother as she begins a downward psychic spiral after 3 years trying to adjust to American life. So, from The Reluctant Fugitive. During a sticky August night when everyone else was sleeping, Mom shook me awake. She told me we were going back to Yokohama. When she asked me, "You come, yes?" I nodded, and she helped me to get dressed because we were in a hurry. She said she had already packed other clothes for me. I asked her if we should tell Dad, Grandma, and Grandpa that we were going, and she told me never mind, it was all done. I grabbed a rabbit's foot, compass, and penknife to take with me. We snuck out my bedroom window to avoid opening the creaky front door and began a long walk from our house. Pulling me along, Mom finally stopped by the parking lot of an inn where we began hitchhiking. That's when the night toppled, spilling ink from its bottles of terrible dreams. A car came by, then pulled over to the side of the road where we were standing. The driver seemed very happy to see us, and after a choppy back and forth conversation, he understood my mother wanted to get to Newark Airport or close to it. He said it was her lucky night or something like that, and told her to put her suitcase and overnight bag in the back seat so we could sit up front. After what seemed to be hours of driving, I saw him looking at my mother more than he was looking at the road. He began to ask my mother questions, and when he slid a hand toward her lap, she slapped it and shrieked at him. Mom scrunched away from the driver and leaned into me as far as she could. When he tried to touch her again, I began yelling too, showed him my judo hands, and threw my rabbit's foot at his head, which bounced right back into my hands. So lucky. He cursed and swerved to the highway's narrow shoulder, barely giving us enough room from a guardrail to get ourselves and bags out of the car. He kept cursing at us, and told us to get out. As we jostled our things out of the car, we kept yelling, if only to drown out the vicious cursing, and more cursing of what he was saying. He slammed the door behind us and then sped away. We stood mute in a miserable world. What we saw on our side of the road were tattered billboards, marshland, and beyond that, darkness. Beckoning us to the other side were the neon lights of a gas station, a diner, and just beyond it, a motel. 4 lanes of highway and a concrete divider in the middle stood in our way. Doppler waves of roaring engines, spinning tires, and honking horns terrorized us, left us in their wake, exhaust wafting behind. Headlights from both directions flashed momentarily on my mother's face and then on the pock-marked billboard that displayed happy smokers. Debris swirled on the highway's shoulder. Soda cans, sheets of newspaper, and empty cigarette packs sputtered briefly aloft with each passing car. Sensing a break in traffic, Mom grabbed my trembling hand in our bags. She led the way, and we lunged into the first 2 lanes, scrambled over the divider, ran across the road, then stepped over the guardrail, and finally rested on the other side. There, Mom looked back across a highway, as if admiring her work. Though we were out of breath, it seemed we had not run out of luck. The clerk in the motel office wore a perplexed look on his drooping face when my mother checked us into the motel. Perhaps he had watched his improbable guest cross the parking lot toward his office, this Oriental woman and her kid. Why wouldn't we provoke suspicion? Asia had swelled with fanatics in Japan, Red China, and North Korea. If he had seen us plunging across the highway, wouldn't we have looked like we were on a suicide mission? Regardless, the man was kind and patient, treated us as I imagined he would other guests. My mother seemed unruffled by the night's events, capably registering us and paying for the room. I regarded her with pride and something like horror. As she unpacked, Mom spoke Japanese to reassure me and, perhaps, to convince herself that everything would be all right. She took her altar objects from her overnight bag and arranged them on a bureau. I watched her from my bed as she lit incense and bowed before the Buddha. When my mother was done praying, she told me we probably wouldn't make it all the way to Yokohama on this trip. Next time she would plan better. When the time came, would I go with her? When I said yes, My own voice sounded as if it belonged to someone else. "Oh, he's my Akachan. Oh, he's my child," she said. After we finished talking, I let my head sink into the strange pillow. This night had a life of its own, and I knew it would spread in ways beyond our knowing. "Are you asleep, Akachan?" I kept my eyes closed and didn't answer. I didn't want to talk to her. I lay in bed for a long time, wondering about Dad, Grandma, and Grandpa, and worrying about whether they'd take us back. I thought about our night ride, and I was afraid of what I would see in my dreams. When Mom woke me in the morning, it felt like I had stayed awake all night. She called Dad, and when he came for us, they said things to each other that changed nothing. The momentum of bad things rolled forward and faster. My father clenched the Buick steering wheel as if he was choking it. My mother stared through the windshield and made her eyes dead. I was afraid of their ferocious silence and stopped looking at either of them. I rubbed the lens of my cheap yellow compass, its needle stuck in place, always pointing in the wrong direction. These are two poems about family. Sayonara Okasan, Sayonara Mother. It was a time between languages when Japanese words sank in the dusk and the rising sun crowed in English. Instead of goodbye or farewell, she told him to say sayonara, which means this is how it must be. The boy squinted into those twilights, saw his mother adrift on the horizon, lost her at the vanishing point. She sailed back to Yokohama. Her madness was her compass. He was a map she ripped apart. He wished her away many times, had no right to mourn her, this demon boy of selfish wishes. He suffered long and learned no shame was on his hands, though he still feels her breath like a feather that never lands, drifting soft, unseen behind that boy who searches yet in twilight's dimming. Hear, hear. The Fisherman. My old man died when I was out for lunch. What I ate. They must know I'm out on work release. The Fisherman. My old man died when I was out for lunch. What I ate, I don't know. The nurse waited for me, sat cross and ready by the bed, and told me, "He's gone now." Good, I thought I said to myself, but the woman shuddered, so I knew I said it out loud. Not wanting her to think me a ghoul, I said, "He didn't deserve to live." A miserable moment more. She moaned as if I had flipped her in her grave. Then I said, "He taught me it's best to stop the beating hearts of those already dead." Once, we found a big brown at the water's edge, its speckled flank gashed, gills still pumping. The old man took it, swung its head upon a rock. The more I talked, the worse it got. She scurried from the room before I said, "I'm glad he's dead." You see, life kept reeling him in, a con man who stole his mind first, then robbed him choice by choice. When spring comes, I'll bring him down to the river at dusk as trout rise and dive between their grand worlds of air and water. When spring comes, I'll crouch by the bank, deliver him to the sounds of water changing, the promises of rainbows jumping. these recurring dreams of falling. A tower, a high wire, a steeple. The dreams don't say if you jumped or were pushed, just that you are falling. No choice nor wings. You reach out, grasp one thing. That's the idea that you will die. It's what saves you, shakes you awake in bed if you never left. A bridge, a ledge, a cliff. You crawl to the edge, watch notes tumble from God's worn pocket. All life's secrets set free like butterflies. You chase after them, catch and read every note. As if by a magician's clap, the dream snaps shut. Wisdom disappears. The falling never was. In the dark, you hear the rustle of butterflies. They clutch God's notes, take life's secrets, flutter to the sky, the river, the moon, gliding beyond understanding. This final poem, My American Grandma. On an Indian summer day, I left for college and for good. Leaves shook free from the ancient oak towering over my grandparents' house. I had packed favored books to certify my intelligence, along with writing tablets, pencils, pens, and a slide rule, mostly for show. In that rabble of scholarship, there was that picture of the girl more beautiful than I deserved, proof beyond reason I could be loved. This bounty I stuffed into a rush-covered suitcase, a suitcase Grandma gave me, ancient and sturdy like her. I tossed the rest into boxes, shoved the mess into the trunk of my green Plymouth, sat behind the wheel, then rolled down my window and said, "I guess I've got everything." Grandma said, "Yes, you have." With her silver hair and gray eyes, she seemed born old, but she was quick, though her left leg was shorter than the other. A Pyrrhic wind for polio, the child killer that tried to claim all of her, but failed. Others had it much worse. Mine was nothing, was her staunchest complaint. My life's calculus had come to depend on her, there at the top of the stoop, squinting in autumn's unpredictable light that dodged between the leafy branches above this house, my home since I was 10. Now, in our parting, the years in between, inhaled and exhaled with the life ahead and the life behind. And Grandma said, "Oh, you're free, white, and 21, and you can do anything you put your mind to." I nodded, concurred for her benefit. Her metrics of me were, as she might say, off kilter, since just half of me was white and all of me was 18. If she was loose with the facts, her specifications of my being were not denials of who I was. Rather, it was confirmation that her blood rushed through the chambers of my own heart as sure as it coursed through hers. It was she who stepped up when my mother's tsunami of woes swept her to Yokohama, as my father sank like a stone in the wake of her leaving, and I, in the tide of his undoing, choked between the waves of grief until plucked and saved by this woman who took in her son's son. She who became more than grandmother but never quite mother, neither fish nor fowl, as she might say, full of cliches and proxies, those tired volunteers for words she would not utter, forever honoring our family's silent promise to keep our feelings to ourselves, because once set free, they could turn to beasts and destroy us. On that autumn day, we kept each other safe, did not say or touch, waved goodbye to each other, and I drove on. My head brimmed with ideas of what had come before and dreams of what was to be. That wondering inside of me, shouts of the lost, clouds within clouds, all ready to burst between the divisions of what I understood and of what I would never understand. When she had said, "You can do anything you put your mind to," nothing added up. Whatever the sum of me, it was always one part more disbelief in myself. By that back stoop wrapped in autumn's unpredictable light, I had held my agnostic breath when I should have let go, should have unleashed one jubilation for the both of us. Let it multiply itself with our shared life's calculus. Let it sing out loud, sing for dear life, as I held Grandma in my arms, thanking her, thanking her, thanking her. And thank you.